Okay, we have a guest today, and it's a good friend of mine, Daryl Harriman, and his wife, Vidya. They just moved here because Daryl's a great nurse anesthetist. And, Daryl needs to stand up for a second. Yeah. I know, I just need to stand up. This is Daryl, and this is me, okay? So I'd like you to point this out. That's okay. I won't put you through any more pain. But you see how big Daryl is. But he's a great nurse anesthetist, and it's amazing to see the care and compassion he has for his patients, even though he's that big. Now, Daryl and I met each other when my senior year of high school when I was dating his older sister. And he and I went through black belt training together. We were trained in American Freestyle, which sort of morphed into the MMA techniques you're familiar with now. Daryl went on and got two other black belts, a second and a third degree, and I forget what other styles. He also, a couple years ago, broke the world shrug record at 950 pounds. And with all that, I can still kick his rear any day of the week. Or actually, as I posted on Facebook, any night of the week when I'm sleeping in my dreams. Okay? But the point I want to make is that some of you may recognize this, because a while back when we were studying Samson, I put up two pictures. I put up a picture of Daryl, and I put up a picture of me. And I said, which one do you think Samson looks like? And all of you said, oh, Daryl. Okay? And I would argue the exact opposite. Because if I told you that Daryl ripped the doors off that wall, you'd go, well, okay, all right. Like Samson ripped the gates off the city walls. But if someone told you I ripped the doors off that wall, you'd like that be a miracle. And that's the whole point. I think Samson looked like me, because nobody was expecting Samson to be able to pull this stuff off. And throughout Scripture, God does that a lot. He says, the world tells you this is how things are, but it's lying to you. Because remember, until God comes again, Satan's in control on this earth. We're behind enemy lines. And God says, this is what the world says, but here's reality. And so that's what we're going to talk about today on this Easter morning. Freedom in Christ. Now, we live in the United States, home of the free, land of the brave. But what are we free from? And what is this freedom for? Okay? So to take it from Norman Rockwell, what freedoms do we have from World War II? We have freedom of speech. We have freedom to worship as we choose. We have freedom from fear. We're not being bombed like Ukraine right now. We have freedom from want. Especially if you look at weight levels in the United States, we definitely don't have freedom from want. Okay? But are we truly free? I'd like you to ask something. Freedom of speech. Go cry fire in the latest Dune movie and see what happens. So no, we don't have total freedom of speech. Freedom of religion. Try to pay publicly at the next basketball or football game. So there's limits on that too. Freedom of fear. I'd like you to go downtown at midnight or 1 a.m. by yourself tonight, downtown Dallas, and just go for a stroll. No? Why not? I thought we lived in a safe country and a safe city. Okay? Freedom from want. Now here's a big one, because all modern marketing is based on want. Based on wanting stuff. In fact, as a business professor, let me assure you that although most Americans don't think that coveting is a sin, this is the entire market of the United States, is coveting. Okay? Ooh, I want that. Okay? Our whole economy is built on it. You know, because stop and think about it. Gentlemen, if all the golfing aids, the putters, the balls, everything worked as advertised, then all of us should be shooting below par without any practice whatsoever. And ladies, if all the cosmetics worked as advertised, none of you should look over 18, even when you're 95 years old. Okay? It's all jealousy, because we're all on social media, and that's what drives it. We look at stuff and we say, oh, look at that. They're skinny. I hate them. Oh, look at their kids. Their kids are nice. My kids are terrible. Their house, I didn't say my children are terrible. Well, I'm just reading off this. Okay. Okay, look, these are generalities, okay? All right? They got a new car. I've got an old car. Her husband has a six-pack. Mine has a cooler. This is what we do when we look at social media, okay? So it's all designed to say, ooh, they've got it better than me. What's the issue? Oh, see, apparently I do have a cooler, so she had to move. Okay. But what are these freedoms for? Just like that's that. In America, we want freedom because it allows us to pursue happiness. It's in our founding documents. Okay? We say these rights are inalienable, that everyone is created and has what? Life, inalienable rights, and what are they? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we Americans are good at pursuing happiness. We're not good at being happy, but we're great at pursuing happiness. We believe that unfettered freedom to do anything we want will give us true happiness. And so from the founding, that's been it. But reality says otherwise. From the 1950s to 2010, okay, the level of people saying they were happy in America didn't budge, even though earning power tripled. Well, we got more stuff. We got more money. Why aren't we happier? In 2020, 48% of Americans said they were happy. Then COVID hit. Okay? Last year it was 39%. Because there are limits to our freedoms. You ever said this when you were in college or just out and facing this? If only I could have the freedom of college with the irresponsibility of high school. Where mom and dad paid for everything and I didn't have rent and they had gas in the car and all this stuff. Yeah, that's what I want. And then reality is, yeah, you don't get that. Okay? The culture of therapy reflects this view. And please understand, I'm not saying therapy is bad. I'm just saying it's reflected in this. And you see this, there's a book, The Question of God, that's written by the chief of psychiatry up at Harvard Medical. And they use this idea for a movie that just came out, Freud's Last Session, which wasn't good. Okay, the acting was great. Anthony Hopkins, they did a great job, portraying Freud and Lewis, but it really wasn't this bit. And what the psychiatrist is he teaches psychiatry, and he covers Freudian psychology, or psychology, and he is a Freud expert, and he's gotten in very close with the family and the like. And years ago, he started saying, this is just boring going through this, so he started teaching it as an argument between Freud and Lewis. Because C.S. Lewis was an atheist, and Freud, had his big heyday during Lewis's time. And then Lewis became Christian. And so throughout the book, here's what Lewis would say, here would be Freud's counterpart, here's what Freud would say, here would be Lewis's counteraction, and it's just very well done, and it's at the end. And at the end, he puts out a very interesting chapter that because he's close with the Freud family, he has access to all Freud's documents and letters. And it came out that a week or so before Lewis became a Christian, it just shows in his notes that he took a holiday for the weekend. And Freud's notes say that he had a visitor from Oxford. Doesn't say who. But Dr. Nicolai thinks that it was C.S. Lewis. And he said that Lewis was battling and grappling with these things, and he said, I really would have liked to have been a fly in that wall. And he wrote this book trying to make that argument, okay? Because the bottom line is there's no free lunch. C.S. Lewis, as an atheist, said, I believe there was no God, but I was angry at him for not existing because I wanted things done differently. And he struggled against becoming a believer because at the very bottom of it, he was honest with himself, and he said, I wanted my freedom. I didn't want anybody telling me what to do. And that's what it boiled down to. Because remember, he was also an academic. And I get that. I'm a professor. I have tenure. I can't lose my job. And professors don't like being told that anybody can tell them what to do. Okay? But Lewis realized that he defined as freedom was just slavery to himself. It was just selfishness. Me first. But we all have limits. Fish are happy. They're free when they're in the water. But get them on a hook and bring them up on land and see what happens. A Ford truck can't use a Chevy manual. I'm not going to get into a debate between Chevy and Ford owners here. And the Dodge people that go, that's right, I could touch neither. Okay, we're not going there. But absolute freedom, unlimited freedom, is just an illusion. It does not exist. Okay? Right now, we're playing the Final Four. And did anybody see Bama play last night? That's right. All right. Now, in basketball, and like all sports, what do we have? Rules. And without it, you're really not free to play the game, right? You are really not free to play the game to its limits unless there are rules and limitations. Okay? If you're playing football and the linebackers are allowed to clothesline you as a wide receiver, I'm not really going to go out for that ball and get my neck broken. Okay? There are rules there. So what is freedom? Okay? Lewis said true freedom is the exact opposite of what many people think. It is not freedom from all responsibility to God and others in order to live for yourself. That is bondage to my own self-centeredness. Instead, true freedom is freedom from my silly little self in order to live responsibly in love for God and for others. I want you to think about the last time you got a gift. Did you like it? How'd you feel? Like, oh, this is awesome. Now, my youngest daughter works for Yeti. And so this past Christmas, I got my first gift from her. And I looked at the box and I said, with my ESP, Edmund's Special Powers, I predict that this is a Yeti product. And she's like, you better get used to it. I get discounts. You're getting Yeti for Christmas, birthday, everything. I'm like, okay. And it was pretty good stuff, okay? And it's little espresso cappuccino cups, the fold, and I use it every day. And it's cool, all right? I like it. But you know what? I want you to think about the last time you mowed the lawn for a shut-in. Or you took some food to somebody who needed it. Or you went and visited somebody who's dying. How did that feel? Which felt better? And which lasted longer? Okay? It's not the stuff that matters. It's when we're serving others that we get the most. Christ offers freedom from self. He showed us. He sacrificed everything. It still blows my mind. Not that Christ was pure, that he had not sinned, that he was able to fight off all the sins that we grapple with, sexual sins, anger, cursing, all this stuff. What blows my mind is in the Garden of Gethsemane, Peter cuts off the soldier's ear, and Christ said, put it away. He said, at one word, I could call down legions of angels and waste everything. Christ is beaten to within an inch of his life. He's crucified on that cross. They are cursing him, mocking him, and all he had to do was show weakness for one moment and said, I'm done with this. That's it. That level of discipline, that level of not thinking about self but others, I just can't even comprehend it. And it reminds us that as Christians on this day, we are called to help other people, even if we don't like them, even if they treat us poorly. Because right before he was taken and crucified, Jesus ate with Judas. He fed Judas. He washed Judas's feet. And we're called to do the same thing. Jesus says, I tell you the truth, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. You're stuck with it. In the dictionary, just to get psychiatric on you or psychological, there are 50 words that start with self. Every one of them are negative. Self-applause, self-absorption, self-assertion, self-advertisement, self-indulgence, self-gratification, self-glorification, self-pity, self-importance, self-interest, I just stopped there. Okay? That's not really good for you. But when you hear about much therapy, and again, I don't want to state this as all therapy, but I'm talking about most pop psychology. Okay? It's about finding yourself. Maybe it's not yourself that you need to find. Okay? Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't make decisions for yourself and find your own way. I'm saying finding yourself, that's probably not the best thing. The naive belief that our wishes govern the universe is precisely what a religion attacks. I hear this more and more on college campus where people say they're going to put it out there in the universe. The universe doesn't care about us. God cares about us, but the universe doesn't. Okay? Christ also offers us freedom from guilt. And that's a big one because, as Mark Twain said, man is the only animal that blushes, or actually needs to. Okay? We all have guilt to varying degrees. You know, my father was a CIA agent, and my aunt, my mom's older sister, married a guy who my father worked with who was in charge of security and intelligence for the U.S. Army for the Middle East. And this was years ago. I was visiting, I was staying over their house, and there for breakfast, and his daughter and he were walking in, and they were arguing about something. And he said, ask Edmund, he'll understand. And I'm like, oh, what am I about to be set up for? And she said, will you tell my father that Jesus can forgive anything? And I looked at Lee, my uncle, and I said, she's right, Lee. Jesus can forgive anything. But there's guilt we bear that's hard for us to forgive ourselves for. He's like, yeah, that's it, what he said. And I came back home, and I knew Lee was going on a fishing trip, and I told Dad, I said, I think Lee's struggling with something, and I think you ought to go spend some time with him. And he did, and I picked Dad up afterwards. It is the only time in my life that I ever saw my father shaken. And I said, Dad, is everything okay? And he said, you were right. Lee had a lot to get off his chest. And he said, the intelligence services, you have to make some very difficult decisions. And you rationalize it by saying, I will kill 1 to save 10. I'll kill 10 to save 100. But those numbers add up, and every one of them is on your conscience. And he said, look, son, I thought I'd heard it all. I thought I'd seen it all. He said, and everything in the intelligence community is need to know. And Lee told me a lot of things I didn't need to know. And so just trying to be lighthearted, I looked at Dad and said, so who did kill Kennedy? And he's like, oh, please. But the point is, we all have guilt to various levels. And Jesus says, I'll take that away from you. There is forgiveness with God, even if we find it hard to forgive ourselves. And Jesus said, come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest, and you will find rest and peace for your soul. Christ also offers freedom from fear and worry. Fear and worry still drives us. Recent medical studies showed that 2/3 of all medical visits related to problems caused by stress and worry. 2/3. Okay? And Jesus said, do not worry about what you will eat or what you will drink or what you will wear. And you're going, well, that's easy for you to say. Well, he did it. Okay? And so research shows, maybe a term you've heard lately, that FOMO, the fear of missing out, which is also associated with social media. You see everybody taking these vacations and things, and you're going, oh. And the new car, you're like, oh no, they're doing things and I'm not with them. Just like you were in junior high and high school. Remember that first party you weren't invited to in junior high and how upset you were? Okay? Well, it's just that on a global scale. But on October 4th, 2021, something happened we researchers love, but the majority of people did not. For several hours, everything went down. Do you remember this? Okay. Some of you are going, no, and some of you are going, oh, yes. Okay. Yes, everything, Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, WhatsApp, everything went down. Which is a perfect time for researchers. Because like, woohoo, everything's down worldwide. Now's the time to survey people. And so they did. Several hundred people were surveyed, and the researchers expected woe and pain, and instead, in the optional open-ended questions, many people wrote about their relief and joy that they felt not being connected to social media and the going on of others when this was published in 2023. And they were like, this is great. And so, there's something going around called JOMO, the joy of missing out. There it is. I suggest you embrace it. The joy of missing out. So FOMO is you don't emphasize on what you lack. Don't do something because others are doing it. Or you may have heard it from your parents is, if all your friends jumped off a bridge, would you do it? And probably at that age in junior high you said, well, yeah. Okay. Stop complaining. Instead, focus on what you have. Do something that makes you happy. Connect with real people, not online. And express gratitude to yourself or thank someone for something they've done. Be nice. Arjomo. Do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. Not that I'm speaking of being in need. I've learned in whatever state I am to be content. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. Keep your faith free from the love of money and be content with what you have. For he has said, I will never leave you or forsake you. And change your perspective has all the difference. Do you have an old car? Congratulations. It can't be hacked. There's no computers on it. My car's a 1999. I plan on driving it until I can no longer drive anymore. Because I figure by then self-driving technology will have figured itself out. And in the interim, during the hacking Armageddon, when all your new cars are being hacked and anonymous hackers are driving you off a bridge, not being able to control it, I'm going to happily drive by in my analog vehicle, which has none of these infotainment stuff, because it's just a car, and that's just all I need it to be. Now, this does not mean, however, that I don't need the latest and greatest stereo equipment in my home theater. That's an entirely different discussion, and I think I have biblical basis for that, but we'll see. So what is freedom in Christ? A summary of 12 years of psychiatric research found that over 90% of the studies supported the idea that religion benefits mental health. But just a note, the average American goes to church more than twice as often as the average psychologist. Okay? In 22 of 27 studies reviewed, the more often a person went to church, the better his or her health was. Those who go to church are much less likely to abuse alcohol and drugs. Even if they smoke, people who report that religion is important to them are 7 times less likely to have abnormal diastolic blood pressure. Please do not go out and buy vapes at this time, okay? Churchgoers have less risk for heart disease. I know that's what the data says, but I ain't buying it for the southern churchgoers in the South and the Southeast, because I think that chicken fried steak is going to catch up with us at all those potlucks, okay? The ultimate freedom, no fear of death. And that's what we really celebrate today. 2 generations ago, when surveyed, most people in America hoped for a long, lingering death so they could get their affairs in order. Today, when surveyed, most Americans hope to die in their sleep. Oops, I'm sorry. I didn't click this. We spend our days entertaining ourselves to avoid thinking about death, and we just want to keep that way. Why did COVID bother so many people? I would argue because it's this. I mean, don't get me wrong, COVID was a pain, all right? Same. But for some people, we live in the most advanced society on earth in history, the most powerful, the most wealthy. And so we can delude ourselves into thinking that we're in control, okay? That we're in control when we're not. And we know that to a certain degree. There's a president of the university I worked for a while, and he's a great leader, but he micromanaged everything. Everything. And when he stepped out from being president, he and I would get together for lunch periodically, and we started discussing this, and he asked me, well, what were my thoughts on it? And I looked at him and I openly said, sir, no offense, but what you needed were children. Because he and his wife didn't have children, they just had dogs. And I said, because once you have a teenager, you realize you control absolutely nothing on this planet. You're just trying to steer things in a general direction, okay? And I think COVID had the same impact for other people as well. It reminded them that we aren't in control, and one day we're going to die. And that bothered a whole lot of people. But Jesus said, whoever would save his life will lose it. And whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. And today we are reminded of our biggest promise to remove fear. Death, where is your victory? Where is your sting? But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Now, again, you can sit there and say, that's all fine, and this is a Bible class, and it's Easter, and you're supposed to say things like that. But hey, let's be real. You're a professor, What would you know about difficulties in life? You got a point there. So, let me give you this. This is an Australian guy. His joke is he has no arms and legs. His joke is he worked out so much and he was so powerful, his arms and legs fell off. Okay? But here's his statement on this.
Want arms and legs, but deep down all I want is rest. You know how many people I know with arms and legs who don't have rest? Arms and legs don't give you rest. Money don't give you rest. Sex and drugs, pornography don't give you rest. A better paying job don't give you rest. A secret emotional affair that your wife don't know don't give you rest. Alcohol don't give you rest. And he says, just come to me like a child. Come to me as you are. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. You know I want arms and legs, but deep down...
By the way, the guy's married, has kids, goes all around the world, just got back from Israel where he met with Netanyahu. And he points out, he said when he was born, when he was growing up, when he was in junior high, he said, what in the world? Why did God do this to me? What reason do I have to go on living? And yet this guy has met more celebrities than you and I ever will. He's been in more situations of power than you and I ever will. And he's just enjoying life. Although, as he says in one of his bits, he's not going to win any track meets. Okay? Now listen to him, because he's hilarious. Okay? He's hilarious. But don't take my word for it. Take his. He doesn't have anything that we have, and yet he's still happy. So on this day of Easter, that's what I leave you with. To remind you that whatever we're facing, whatever difficulties we're going, it's not that God said you won't have them. He said, I'll be there with you with all of them. And at one day, which will all happen to all of us, when we're facing death, we don't have to worry about that either. So if we don't have to worry about the big stuff, why get upset about the little stuff? That's it. I'm going to leave you early because I took you later last time, and it's Easter, and you should have some time with your friends. All right, y'all take care.